We are privileged to have with us in this very special interview the Secretary General of AMIC, that's Asian Media Information and Communication Center based in Singapore, Dr. Indrajit Banerjee. Hello, Dr. Banerjee.
Hello.
Dr. Banerjee, what would you consider the most positive developments in Asian communication today?
Well, I think there are numerous very positive developments. I think to begin with is this explosion of the media landscape, which is very positive because the news and information and entertainment reach very, very large audiences. So that in itself, the development of infrastructure and technology has been a blessing in disguise, because media, as you know, are extremely educative tools. And a lot of the people who are not being reached before can reach now, can have access through mainstream media, internet, mobile phones, and so on and so forth. So I think that's, in terms of access, it has been quite phenomenal. Then I think the other very interesting development is how these media are being used to empower people. I mean, if you look at basic reasons for underdevelopment, it is always a lack of access to knowledge, most importantly, whether it be in the healthcare sector or the environment or empowerment of women and so on. But, so there I think we have seen very significant shifts in the advent of commercial media, the advent of free media, advent of more open societies due to the media. But I think one of the most fundamental gains and positive developments has been in the field of democratization. I think the media have really given people avenues to express themselves, to voice their opinion, to hold governments accountable. I think in that sense we have seen very, very significant positive developments.
All right. My next question has to do with what drove these kinds of developments to the fore. It might be unfair because there are many Asian cultures, certainly many countries under the region, inside the region, but what would you say were the factors that brought about these developments?
I think the technology has to be considered to be the first. I think there are three things which drive media development. First is technology itself. The fact that you have so many different channels of media means better access. Second is policy and regulation. I think governments in Asia across the board have become much more liberal with the media in that sense. They have less control over the media. So this technology, policy, and finally, of course, content. And the quality of content also we have seen tremendous development. Although being a critique of the media, I feel that for the number of channels we have and platforms we have in terms of media, the quality of the content is still quite sad. Very entertainment oriented, you know.
These factors that you mentioned, is this true for Asia as it is for other parts of the world?
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Because I think even when you have technology, like radio has been existing in India for so long, it has been government controlled. So unless the policy and regulation changes the environment, the basic objective of any policy or regulatory framework should be to be enabling. So you provide access to people, you liberalize the media landscape, but at the same time, policy and regulation plays another role. It is to maintain some form of order within media systems. Because as you know, there are fundamental groups, there are people who have very destructive tendencies and agendas. You have to make sure that those agendas do not come to the media. So policy and regulation enables on one hand, and at the same time to a certain extent restricts or prevents things from going out of control.
This growth in Asian communication, is it unique the way that it's going, or is it following a certain pattern that has been observed in the West or other parts of the country, the world?
That's a very good question, because of course to a certain extent it follows the patterns around the world. When the internet comes, people have access to the internet and that starts changing things. So, but I think what is special in Asia is the fact that the media development was accelerated so fast. While in Europe you had, print media first, then radio came, then television came, then in the internet came. Here in many parts of Asia, the internet has come at the same time as television. So I think in that sense, it's very, very different, Asia. And again, there I would like to make a point that even within Asia, there are very, very significant differences. I mean, India has an extremely dynamic media landscape, but if you go to Cambodia or other places, you see that the media is not that massive change has not happened. And therefore, I think one of the problems which we are going to face in the future is going to be the digital divide. How do you provide access to people in rural areas? considering the fact that in most Asian countries, majority of populations live in rural areas.
Okay, you preempted my next question. It's good to begin with the positive things because it gives us encouragement and hope for the future. But certainly there are issues that perhaps decelerate the growth in Asian communication and, in fact, in some societies, keep the growth at bay or stop the growth.
Yes.
What would these issues and challenges be that some Asian societies are facing and that keep them from growing in terms of communication technology, and the growth of their mass media?
You see, I think one of the most serious problems with the media is that there is no serious attempt being made to harness the media for development purposes. This is one of my big grudges against the media. I mean, it's so much of entertainment, so much of breaking news, that you forget that the media can be used as a very effective tool for education. In India, we have a 24-hour satellite educational channel. I mean, in countries where people have no access to schooling, the media can be used as a channel. Same goes in terms of environmental awareness. The media don't seem to have any time. This is my argument. They don't seem to have any time for the things that matter. And the commercial agenda is driving the media to such an extent in Asia. We were much better off before, I think, in that sense, that when the government controlled the media, there was a lot of programs on education, on healthcare, and so on and so forth. But today, those things have disappeared. It's completely mind-numbing entertainment which flows through every single possible channel. So that is, again, the downside of this explosion.
What would you say to the argument from the media that it's not their job to educate, it's not their job to change society in the way governments or states can? Are we in fact expecting too much from media in this sense? What do we really want them to do?
Good point, good point. But the media should realize that unlike any other profession, they have the power to influence minds. So they cannot say that they don't have any educational obligations, simply because there is no other tool or instrument in society which can actually influence people's minds. It's the mainstream media, or it's the media as a whole. So I think their argument is a little ridiculous, that you're expecting too much from us. And I would actually counter that point by saying that it is because we expect so much from them and they do so little that there is a problem. We don't expect to have all the time educational content. Of course you entertain, of course you inform, but you also educate. And if you look at public service broadcasting, these are the three mandates of public service broadcasting: inform, educate, and entertain. Whose
job is it to check on the media?
This is actually the most significant problem today, that media are holding everybody accountable. They're supposed to hold governments accountable, they're supposed to hold big corporations accountable, but who holds them accountable? And I think this is where Asia is very weak, unlike European countries. That we don't have any, in most countries we don't have a press council or an ombudsman to watch over the media. So what do you do when the media defames somebody? You go to court. In courts here, it'll probably take 20 years for the case to be completed. So that's not an effective mechanism. So I think we should really try in every country to have independent press commissions, press councils, ombudsmen, and that would make a significant difference, because then you know that the media are under check. In India, actually, we have a very strong press council, and we also have a special body which looks at these issues of defamation, of sedition, of hate content, and so on and so forth. So we have that in India, but I don't know how effective it is at the moment.
All right, so we're still discussing about the challenges and the issues. You mentioned technological development as a plus, a very positive development for Asian media, but some scholars think it is also a minus in the sense that it brings about certain problems. What's your take on that?
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. I think, technology cuts both ways. I mean, you can have a gun and defend your home, and you can have a gun to go and kill people. So it's not a neutral tool. It is used for specific purposes by specific interest groups. So essentially, I see technology as an instrument, and media are instruments also for achieving several things. But what is worrisome today is the excessive use of the media, excessive use of technology, to the detriment of understanding, analysis, depth, it's very superficial. Everything that technology is giving you is very superficial. Plus, I think lately we have observed some very negative effects of technology by the young kids. You know, the kids are on the internet all the time, playing games all the time, like not being able to do homeworks, not being very social at home, because they're also always sitting in the room and, you know, on Facebook or YouTube or emailing or surfing the net. So I think that is something which has to be regulated by families. Media literacy therefore becomes very important. And I'm always surprised, and I tell people that we teach our kids history, geography, all kinds of subjects. They don't teach them about media at all. So media literacy is absolutely fundamental. It should be a subject for every school to have, to explain to kids what are the positive and negative effects of technology, how can they harness them most effectively, for what specific purposes. But there's no media literacy. You will never hear about a class on media in any school.
So we come to this point when we talk about the organization that you represent, because I think it's very central in how communication is developing in the region. So tell us what AMIC does and what purposes it serves in light of these issues that we have been talking about.
Well, AMIC actually is a very powerful and strong organization in terms of research on media. And our research actually covers two aspects. One is we conduct research on the development of the media themselves, the policy and regulation, the technology and so on. But I think the more important focus for AMIC is studying the role of media in development. That is our main focus. So whether it be use of the media for creating environmental awareness, for reporting on HIV/AIDS and other diseases, for issues on gender and empowerment of women. So these are two major research focus we have. Then we also have a lot of workshops, training, capacity building, where we train journalists to report especially on development issues. We have a huge conference, and we are at the conference now in New Delhi. And so I think AMIC's role I would summarize as being a research, publication, resource and a capacity building institution. And we do, of course, through our research a lot of advocacy. When we study the laws of mass media in a specific country, we actually critically explore what the regulations are, whether they're favorable for positive media development and so on. So these are basically our areas of work.
I think the effectiveness of AMIC is anchored on how it can linkage with the different stakeholders in every society, stakeholders involved in communication. How is AMIC able to do that? We can, of course, see how communication can involve the business sector and then the state or the government, the media industry itself, the public sector, and so on.
Well, you know, the media are so central to all processes in society, whether it be economic development, whether it be education, whether it be awareness, whether it be advocacy. So I think each of the stakeholders are kind of forced to either be producers of content or receivers of content and so on and so forth. So I think the key challenge is how do you build up a multi-stakeholder approach to managing media. Because private corporations are so powerful today, they can just push their own agenda all the time. And I think one of the problems is that the media becomes so commercial that people lose sight of what is important in life. You know, it's like, look at all the gossip. What is this film star doing? What is this sports star doing? What is this celebrity doing? If our attention is always focusing on that, then citizens actually forget or become immune to actual real problems in society. So I think the state has to play its role as an enabler, as a regulator to protect citizens. That's the main role of the state. The private sector corporations should take up responsibility, because they are not, what is very, very surprising to me, and we discussed this issue about accountability of the media themselves, is that how much power these organizations have. I mean, they can come out with any information about any topic, and you have no way of knowing whether it's true or not. Mm-hmm. There's no other source of information but the media. And you can never get first-hand information because things are happening all over the world. You can't be traveling everywhere to find out what actually happened. So, so I think the multi-stakeholder strategy is not working out properly, because I think the citizens' voices that has been the biggest problem. These old media forms have no possibility of feedback. I mean, you write a letter to the editor of a newspaper. If you're writing something against the newspaper, they won't publish it.
All right. What is AMIC doing, or what is AMIC planning to do to effect these changes that you're talking about, new paradigms for facing challenges in democracy, in governance, in the digital divide, what have you? How do we position AMIC in the midst of all those challenges?
I think in this context, AMIC is an advocacy group. So, for example, if, I'll give you a concrete example, if we feel with our research that we are not, the media are not paying properly representing women, for example, or minorities, we could do a research project and we could come out with a publication which then goes around to people, and then people realize that there is an issue. So our job I see as a civil society NGO dealing with both the state, the other actor, major actor, and the private sector. So we are very critical of, for example, excessive commercialization, concentration of ownership in the media industry. So we do a lot of advocacy work in these areas. And I think by training our journalists across the Asia-Pacific region, I think we make the journalists themselves much more aware of what their roles and responsibilities are. So we deal with state, the private sector, the media industry, as well as the journalists themselves. Because once you empower the journalist, he is much better informed as to what his role and responsibility is.
All right. What success stories can you share with us about AMIC's work, for example, in training journalists, in making sure that they know their responsibilities in this evolving, in the evolving societies with technology coming in and citizen journalism growing in some places?
Well, I think AMIC has a lot of success stories. Look at the amount of publications we do, and which is used to educate journalists and media professionals. I think that itself is a huge contribution. The amount of, we also publish the Media Asia Journal, for example, which is Asia's oldest media quarterly now. So this is a very much a knowledge dissemination kind of task of ours. We disseminate knowledge on media issues. But I'll give you a very simple example. Once I was, a Bangladeshi gentleman called me up and said that he was passing through Singapore and he wanted to stop by and say hello. And he was going to the Philippines. So I didn't know why he wanted to meet me. I didn't know the person at all. So he came back from the Philippines, and on his way back he stopped by Singapore and met me. And he said he had just received the Max AC award for journalism. So I said, what is your connection with AMIC? He said, well, in 1976 or 1976, he had attended a workshop conducted by AMIC for journalists. And then he went on to get a Max AC award. So that's a huge success story as far as I'm concerned.
So you have planted seeds, good seeds along the way.
Exactly.
Along the way. As a final question, Dr. Banerjee, many Asian societies today face a lot of challenges, political turmoils and all that. Very briefly, how can media change all that? How can media can drive the development of more democratic institutions so that more Asians can enjoy their freedoms and develop as citizens?
I think the question is very relevant. I think the media are absolutely critical tools for democratization and for good governance. And I think it does this through various ways. One of the most fundamental ways is perhaps holding public servants accountable, holding governments accountable. Because if Asia has one of the problems is corruption, rampant corruption. And the state is so powerful that unless another equally powerful instrument comes and exposes the corruption, the scams, all that's happening, the oppression of citizens, nobody can do anything about it. So once the media highlight these issues, explain to people what actually is going on around them, because life has become so complex and we are getting globalized so quickly that it's very difficult to keep track of what's happening. So I think the media play an absolutely brilliant and a most important role, which you see especially in terms of crisis, during the tsunami or during a war. I mean, the media are the only, your only voice to tell people what's happening, to run to high ground, to take care of yourself. If there's an outbreak, what happens? If there's a riot, what happens? What is a safe place to be in? So you see in conflict and crisis, you can realize how powerful and instrumental the media are. But in normal times, it's just breaking news, soaps and serials and sitcoms, and very little really genuine content. So I think the media are critical instruments for advocacy, for education. The media also, I think, to a certain extent, constitutes an extremely powerful tool for nation building. And that's always been the case in countries like Asia, in places like Asia, that the media give the citizens a sense of a shared symbolic identity. And I think the media are very instrumental in that. For example, promoting your culture, your languages. Those are also very important aspects of democratization. Democracy is not just voting once in 4 or 5 years and having elected government. Democracy is also being able to express, to protect your culture, your diversity. That's also a fundamental right. So in these ways, the media can do, don't always do, but can do rather significant work in terms of promoting good governance, democratization, and I think they are the citizens' best ally.
Thank you for the interview and for your time.
Thank you, Chechi.